When we think about the great American migration stories, our minds usually jump to things like the gold rush or the hunger for land. But what if one of the most important migrations, one that literally shaped the heart of the country, was fueled by something totally different? A crisis of conscience. Today, we're going to explore a forgotten route and the thousands who traveled it, not for wealth, but for the freedom to live by their principles.
So let's set the scene. It's the early 1800s, and for communities like the Quakers and the German Baptist Brethren, or Dunkers, living in the South, things were getting complicated. Slavery was completely woven into the fabric of the Southern economy. But for these groups, their faith was on a total collision course with the culture all around them. For them, staying put was becoming morally impossible.
And listen, we're not just talking about a few brave individuals packing a bag. I want you to imagine entire congregations, whole communities, making the unbelievable decision to abandon everything, their homes, their farms, the lives they had built from scratch, all to stand by one powerful belief. So what could possibly push someone to take such a huge leap? Well, let's dig in. It was a really powerful mix of faith, personal principle, and just immense social pressure. See, for these communities, this wasn't some abstract philosophical debate. It was their daily reality. Their faith said flat out that slavery was a sin, so they made their own anti-slavery rules inside their own groups. But the second they stepped outside their meeting houses, they were surrounded by it. We know from historical accounts that they were made fun of for their beliefs, they were hit with unfair taxes, and they were basically living in a society that was the complete opposite of what they stood for. And this right here, this story, it just drives home the incredible personal sacrifice we're talking about. Take Tobias Miller. He inherits enslaved people. Now, he could have sold them, but instead, he freed them. And that single act, driven purely by his conscience, completely bankrupted him. It was only then, with pretty much nothing to his name, that he headed west. This wasn't some casual decision. It cost people absolutely everything they had. But here's the thing. These families weren't just running from something. They were running toward something. A really powerful idea. The promise of a brand new start.
And that promise was called the Northwest Territory, the land that would eventually become Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. Because of a law called the Ordinance of 1787, slavery was forever prohibited there. So this is really the key. It wasn't just an escape, it was a journey with a purpose, toward a place where they could build a society that actually matched their values.
Okay, so they had the motivation, they had the destination. But how on earth do they actually get there? Well, they followed a rugged, really demanding path called the Kanawha Way. This route, which was originally a Shawnee Warpath, slices right through the Appalachian Mountains. Now, it was the most direct route, but it was definitely not the easiest. For decades, this trail became the main highway, so to speak, for this incredible migration driven by ideals. And here's the amazing part. We know their exact route today because of this incredible piece of history. It's a Quaker waybill from 1809. It's basically their version of a turn-by-turn GPS, a literal roadmap to freedom that lets us retrace their steps with unbelievable accuracy more than 200 years later. And just look at this. It shows you how incredibly organized this whole thing was. The waybill broke down the entire 481-mile journey into small, manageable chunks. It named specific landmarks, ferries, even people's homes along the way. It took what seemed like an impossible trek and turned it into a series of achievable goals, all the way from North Carolina to Indiana. So what was this journey actually like? Let's be real. It was a grueling, multi-stage odyssey that would have tested every ounce of their resolve. Okay, so the journey kicks off at the New Garden Meeting House. Right away, it's an exhausting climb over the Blue Ridge Mountains. Then they had to somehow get through the treacherous New River Gorge. After that, they literally had to build their own boats to float down the Kanawha River. And finally, they had to cross the massive Ohio River before the final overland trek to Indiana. I mean, let's just pause here for a second and think about the sheer difficulty of this. This wasn't a leisurely hike. We're talking about moving entire families, with kids and elderly folks and all their possessions and wagons and their livestock through some of the toughest, most unforgiving terrain in the eastern U.S. It was a constant, brutal challenge. But it wasn't just about endurance. It was about being incredibly resourceful. Once they made it through the mountains, the challenge just changed. The river widened out, and right there, on the riverbank, these farmers and homesteaders had to become shipbuilders. They'd stop, chop down trees, and build these huge flatboats from scratch just to carry everything they owned down the river. So what exactly is a flatboat? Well, don't picture anything fancy. Think of it more like a giant, wooden, one-way cargo barge. It was big, simple, and it did the job. Guided by a really long oar, this floating platform was basically their family ferry, carrying them toward the Ohio River. So after getting across the massive Ohio River, they were on the final leg of the journey. They followed a series of roads and trails through Ohio, hitting key spots like Chillicothe and Waynesville. After crossing one last big river, they finally made it into Indiana, and their destination, Richmond, was just ahead. So after almost 500 miles of incredible hardship, they made it. But arriving wasn't the end, right? It was just the beginning of the real work, building new lives, from the ground up on free soil. You can really see the transformation here. They left behind established communities to build brand new ones that reflected their values. They didn't just bring their families, they basically transplanted their entire way of life, creating these principled anti-slavery enclaves in the brand new states out west. And you really can't overstate their legacy. These people weren't just settlers, they were founders. Their presence helped shape the identities of Ohio and Indiana as free states. They built towns and farms that prospered for generations. And more than anything, they proved that one of the most powerful engines in American history wasn't just the pull of land, but the push of conscience. It's just a remarkable story of conviction and pure grit. And it leaves you wondering, in a world where we can travel so easily, what belief do you hold that's so deep, so important, that you would walk away from everything you know and trek 500 miles into the unknown for it? What's your Kanawha Way?